Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show where we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about Sweet Home Season 1, Episode 2. A lot of really interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. So, I brought this up last episode. I figured that this would be the episode they would bring in Hyun's past, which narratively speaking it makes a lot more sense because it seems like based on what they're doing with this that they are handling things in a very, once again, from the little bit I've read, I have to preface that again, I've only read a tiny bit of the webtoon, but at least in the webtoon it seems like they bounce back and forth timeline wise, like at least like not only with flashbacks with some of the characters which we got this episode, but also just hey, there were some flashbacks to stuff that happened in this building. Like the example I gave is, I believe it's the bass player, Jisoo. She ends up, like, once again, I brought it up, when you kind of get a little bit of her background, you see her leaving the building the moment Hyun shows up, but that's not the case in this, because I think narratively speaking for the show, they're trying to make everything that's happening inside the building happen in chronological order. They're not going to be moving around like they did, at least early parts of what I've read of the manhwa. So, but yeah, narratively speaking, yes, he's knocked out for a little bit after he passes out. Once again, when he runs into the mobster, who I should also point out, the character Sang-wook. I was wondering, I was just looking at the actor who plays him. I kept being like, is he familiar? And yeah, the actor's name is Jin-wook Lee. The thing I know him from is the show Bugaso Immortal Souls. He's the, I think is was it Don Hwal? Is that the character's name? It's been a while. It's another Korean drama on Netflix, at least here in the US. I don't know if it's on Netflix internationally speaking, but yeah, like he's the lead of that show. So I was like, oh dude, no wonder you look so familiar to me. It took me a second to realize who he was, but I just thought that was interesting. Either way, when Hyun and him had their interaction and he passes out, it also seems like he was only out for a couple hours, because I know, because it says like, oh, 8 hours later and we catch up with him, he's up staring outside, because I think in the webtoon he's out for like 2 days. But either way, my point was, like, narratively speaking, he's unconscious, and obviously he's got his past being what it is. As we learned, his family, which includes his mom and his dad and his sister, all died in a car accident, leaving him all alone. And so for them, they kind of, what I thought was so interesting, because how that's unveiled, like I said, that's the opening, like, prologue to the manhwa, and even the funeral stuff comes up after he's already moved in present day, and he's looking back on how he acted during their funeral, and he was kind of disgusted with himself. We don't see that sequence. They didn't do it like that. They just show him getting dragged out, but him like being dragged out, thrown out, and the check that he kind of gets saying like, oh, they left you like 30 million won. He's just kind of like, okay, if I do this, and he starts calculating like, I have to do this and I do this. If I sell the house, maybe I'll have enough money to survive. They haven't, like, not let's say circle back to that, but that is part of that sequence we don't get to see. So either they cut that part out, maybe because they wanted to try to make Hyun seem even more sympathetic, maybe including that like would make him a little worse for wear character wise. So maybe they wanted to kind of make you a little more sympathetic to him, be like, hey, he's acting like this because it's still true of just like he just lost his entire family. He's been a very reclusive character, as we've learned more about his backstory a little bit more in this episode as well, that of course he's going to act that certain way, but maybe chopping that bit off, either like I said, they're going to save that for later, or they just not including that bit of his of that sequence. Some really interesting things about, once again, things being taken out of sequence and stuff is the half-head monster. For one, we got to see who it was before they transformed into the thing, because where I'd read in the story, we still hadn't, like, by the time Hyun interacts with it, like he does in this episode, that sequence happens first in the webtoon before we find out how it lost its head. We just know, like, hey, someone cut half of its head off, but that's all we knew. We didn't, it's so interesting to have context that even I didn't have from reading the manga, because I didn't get that far. So, they kind of preface it storytelling wise. Where this episode ends is actually a little bit, I would assume, a little bit after where I've left off in the webtoon. Jisoo was with, is it Jaehyun? I think he's the teacher, the Korean teacher who's also the religious guy, him like rolling up with the sword and helping her out, and cutting that thing's head off, and he's like, oh, it's probably dead. Yeah, and as we find out, these things are super hard to kill. So I don't know if there's a definitive way to kill them, because I mean, once again, it's pretty early in the series, both the manhwa wise from what I've read, but also where we are in the show. So who knows if there's like an answer to that. But like I said, like us getting that context, and that's what I mean also when I said like, yeah, things are happening chronologically speaking, because I'm assuming we would get that sequence a little bit after where I am in the webtoon. So for them to kind of like I said, everything that's happening in the building currently, we're going to try and keep that as like chronological as possible and not bounce back and forth like it seems like the webtoon does, like bouncing around time frames and stuff, which it does seem like they still do it to some extent, because there's a sequence between the fighter and Hyuk that it seemed like, oh, this was like, it wasn't translated. We see a 3, so I don't know if that's supposed to be like, oh, 3 hours earlier. I'd assume because at that point the power was still on and later on it gets cut off, so I'm assuming that was supposed to be like, I doubt 3 days, maybe it was more like 3 hours earlier, because they were staring at like surveillance footage and stuff like that. So that's one of those instances of them being like telling stuff out of chronological order in that capacity. I mean, once again, it's not going to be the same case all the way through, but I get the feeling they'll probably try as much as possible to keep things as chronological as possible. Unless it's specifically flashbacks to stuff outside of this building, or when it's more specifically related to the backstory of characters and stuff. Like we got with Jisoo in this episode, we found like when they found someone hanging, she fell to her knees, and it kind of flashed back to her doing the same thing. Like whoever the bass guitar she uses belonged to, killed themselves, and that's why she has it now. They gave it to her, so I don't know if that was like a friend, or probably more likely, just assuming, I'd assume it's probably more likely her brother. Speaking of monsters, we have Eun Hyo. Like I said, I butcher Korean. God Jesus, I can't get the words out. I butcher Korean names, so do apologize. But Eun Hyuk's sister, I think it's Eun Hyo or Yo. She's going down the stairs because she doesn't know what's going on, and mobster dude Sung-wook is coming down the stairs, and they encounter the actress that's a neighbor's of Hyun's, and he gets bitten, but he takes it like a G and starts beating it he beats her up, and like there's a part of the wall I think that was kind of covered by plastic because like there's a hole in the wall, and he starts kicking her repeatedly into it. I guess it's a hole in the wall. I was wondering if I thought the point was going to be to kick her and then she'll fall through the wall and then fall down the building. I thought it was, but I guess it's just a hole in the wall. There is flooring and space there. It's just a wall. There's no like empty space for her to fall down like almost like an elevator shaft. It's nothing like that. And I love that he's kicking and kicking. He's getting covered in blood, and Eun Yo is also getting covered in blood too. Even to the point it splatters in her face to the point it splatters in her eye, and her eye's turning a little red, and she's just staring at him. From the little I read in the webtoon, I haven't gotten enough time with her to know her personality. Like, once again, that smoking sequence, even though it's different in the show, is the only thing I've really gotten of her personality-wise in the manhwa. But, like, she's kind of an ass. Like, the fact is, when Sam-wook goes downstairs and everyone sees his wound, it's like, hey, we've seen movies. If he was bitten by a monster, he's most likely going to become one. So they tase him and knock him out. But it's like, she doesn't say anything. To be fair, her brother comes over and like wraps her up. I guess almost trying to make it seem like, hey, she was here the entire time, but she doesn't like her brother. So she like pushes him away and ends up like going off on her own. Like she's trying to keep it together as much as possible. But this whole situation has scared her like crazy, because she just washes herself up and you see like her hands are shaking. Like she tries to pretend like everything's okay. Like I think it's just, she puts up this bravado. Maybe diving into her past more, we'll kind of find out why she seems like she has a little bit of a chip on her shoulder, why she's just so like kind of an asshole. But we'll see. Like I said, it just feels like that's her overcompensating. My point was like she didn't stick up for him like, hey, the guy protected me, but I guess that was also her brother Hyuk's situation of being like, yeah, don't say anything. I'm gonna cover you up, but also like don't act like you were so, because everyone was so focused on him coming out the door, like no one bothered to see and notice her. So even if they did, she's not the one that's wounded. He is. So he ends up getting tied to a chair, and the I was wondering if he was the main guy that tries to act like a leader. I was wondering Sokyeon. I was wondering whether or not he was a. I didn't think he was like the manager of the place. I think we had met the manager of the place. I don't remember if that's the same dude, because he's the one that was telling the security guard, "Hey, like, stop putting your bed here." I don't know if that's the same dude who turns into the head, like the half chopped off head monster. I don't know if that's the same dude or not. I don't remember if it is. But Sukyeon tries to kill Sangwook, but it doesn't work out in his favor. And Sangwook just leaves. And he's climbing up and seeing situations as it is, and Eon Yo follows him. And it's like, oh, if you turn into a monster, I'll kill you. And she's like, well, I'll do the same thing to you. I got something that works pretty well on you. And she has to taser. It's just, she's kind of going her own way. Not even, like, I don't even know if her brother notices that she's going. It's like, why she's acting like that. I don't know what her beef with her brother is. I don't know. I guess maybe he was always a goody two-shoe brother, and she always felt like she was inferior in some way. Maybe that plays a little bit to their dynamic. Once again, don't know enough about their situation, but it just, I'm curious why she's not around her brother right now. We also learn more about the monsterization as the terminology for when they turn into monsters. There's the nosebleed, the auditory hallucinations, which they didn't use as much at this point, but they kind of tie that in at the end of the episode a little bit. That's why last episode I was asking whether or not those text messages he was receiving about, oh, your parents are dead, yada, 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 so on and so forth, whether or not those were real or not. Because I know there is a hallucinogenic element to this whole process. So that's why I was like, I wasn't sure if that was just seeping in there. But because at that point, Hyun hadn't had a nosebleed, that I'm like, right, it must be a situation of that probably most likely was real. Because we don't really get into the hallucinogenic element to it until like the end of the episode. And specifically, they use the term auditory hallucinations, because I do know like you can see stuff. I've seen, like, I know in the webtoon Hyun sees some stuff, but I don't know if that might have just been not even a monsterization thing. I think that might have just been like him being scared of shit, and because he like imagines like hearing the monster and seeing the like half head monster like one or two times during that sequence when he's in the hallway trying to avoid it. And that was just a hallucination, but it's like, was that part of the monsterization, or was that just him being scared of this thing? Because to be fair, it's the only one he has direct run-in with, because the girl next door, he never did. She was outside of his door, so he never had to like directly interact, whereas the monster with half a head, he directly interacted with that. Which I thought that was so interesting, too, how that sequence plays out, because in the webtoon, that sequence goes so much longer in that way. Well, actually, I want to finish my thought first, and then I'll circle back to this. What I was also bringing up about that situation is, like, it's kind of the same thing Yu was kind of saying, like, oh, if you're going to kill yourself, like, do it somewhere else so you don't inconvenience other people. The post was kind of saying, like, hey, if you're turning into a monster, kill yourself so you're doing the betterment of other people. And the post I thought was so interesting, where it's like, do what you can, but, we're all, and then the post stops because the internet cuts out. But they lean into it in the Manhwa, because it's like, nah, we're fucked. We're fucked. That's the literal last line. I guess maybe for sensory reasons, like, I don't know. Maybe they just felt the need to like cut it off there. But I want to also circle back to that situation, because at the same time, Hyun is online, so is Hyuk. And I think that's so interesting, because in the manhwa, they have an online interaction, but they're not aware of each other's, because they're using their online handles to communicate with each other through this like website, and he's asking these questions and stuff like that. And it wasn't until a little while where it took Hyun almost into the end of their conversation to realize, oh, the person I'm talking to is is someone from this building. Now, I don't have a resolution to that, but like they don't have that interaction in the show. It's just both. It's cutting back and forth between both of them becoming more knowledgeable about everything going on. So I just thought that was interesting. But circling back to the half-headed monster, that sequence of it going inside of his room is a much longer sequence in the webtoon. Like, it stays in his room for a while. He even has to hide out in the bathroom, has to be careful about peeing. That's actually a whole sequence situation. So that sequence actually goes on. I don't know if it's days or what, because he stays locked in that bathroom for a while, and there's no like, he doesn't have his phone on him, so there's no like telling what the passage of time is in that frame. Like, it's unclear how much time passed when he was in the bathroom. So that sequence goes on a lot longer in the webtoon than it does the because it just kind of goes in and goes out. I mean, I also don't know if his room has a bathroom, because his room isn't structured exactly. It's not a 1-to-1 exactly from the webtoon, because for one, he has a mattress. He just has a mattress on the floor, whereas in the webtoon, he has a bed frame, so he's able to hide. Like, it's decently high enough off the ground for him to hide under, which is part of sequences pretty early on. So that's where I'm like, there are little differences. So there might not be a bathroom, so that might be why they cut that, or it might just be like, hey, we don't have to make this sequence that long. Let's kind of get some of it there. Which also threw me when thing stretched his arm. I was like, oh, are they not going to do the thing with when it makes impact? But they do it later on, the whole branching out thing. Like, I was like, oh, I guess they're just not doing this for this creature. But they waited till like the sequence in the hallway later to do that. I was like, okay, cool. You're saving it for there, so it comes as a surprise where you're like, okay, he dodged it. Oh, okay, good. He's still alive, but okay, this thing can branch out. So I think it's meant to be like a surprise. I'm like, yeah, this thing has a little more tricks up its sleeve, rather than you already knowing that, because that by that time by the time we get to that sequence where it does it in the show, it's already done it like 3 times. That might have been the 3rd time the creature's done it, because it does it once to his bed, then it does it once to the bathroom, and then it does it that time in the hallway during that whole sequence. Like I said, I do apologize, I'm jumping around a little bit, but I thought that was so fascinating, once again, to be able to have that comparison of like, hey, this episode also did something interesting too. Like, we're spending a lot of time with the group downstairs. I, once again, hadn't got where I was in the story, hadn't covered that part, so kind of seeing them figure stuff out. We find out a little bit more about Suk-hyun, find out how much of a garbage piece of shit person he is. He's an abusive person to his wife, calling her a bitch, saying like, hey, you should be, oh, you didn't even notice that I was gone. Like, no one really cared enough. Everyone's just like, oh, because they sent him, like, 2 of the people specifically sent him to go kill Sang-wook, but it didn't work out that way. Which, speaking of him, I completely forgot about talking about the guy that he had wrapped up in tape, and he was putting a cigarette in his mouth and everything. I was like, Jesus. I love that Jisoo and, like I said, I believe it's Jaehyun run into him, and they unravel him, and like even you could tell they were a little like, about him going back in the room and getting a hammer. Like, oh, you guys have a weapon, so do I. But yeah, they came across that dead body, and Home Dude was like, oh, the guy didn't just kill himself. He's been dead a week. It's like, how do you know? And he's like, just, that's a guess. I was like, yeah, I don't trust this guy. This guy seems weird, especially later on when he wants to go off on his own. I mean, we don't know why Sang-wook was like torturing him. Like, he was trying to get some information. He specifically shows him something on the phone, but we don't get to see what it is. He did later on receive like a message. I don't know if it was like someone paying, like, I don't know if he was getting paid to do something, but he got like, what was like 7,800 won. It was something like that. I don't know if that was like a payment or what the hell that was. I don't know if like he's a gangster enforcer of like, oh, you owe money, I retrieved that. So like Home Dude owed some money. I'm assuming he's maybe not a good guy himself. Maybe he's from like a rival. Because at least in the manhwa, it's like, oh, I'm not a mobster. Like, people try to act like I'm a mobster or a gangster, but it seems like there's more to him. But definitely leaning into the mobster gangster, because he's more of the silent type in the show than what we've gotten. What I know of him, the little bit I know of him in the manhwa. I keep saying that. I'm sorry. Like I said, going forward, past this episode, you won't hear me say it as much, considering like this is roughly where I was in the manhwa once again. So. But circling back to everyone kind of on the entrance level, it's just, it's getting to know some of the other characters, and there's the lady with the dog who kind of knows everything. I don't know if we got an explanation of like what her deal is. It's Hie in what her deal is because she just knows like everyone and where they live. I don't remember if she really explained why she knows all that. There's also that sad situation where the mom who wants to go outside to save her daughter, but it's like, I mean, it's that mentality. Well, it's mainly Hyuk who makes the decision of like no, but no one fights him on it because I mean everyone's looking out for themselves and self-preservation. But later on, he's like, right, if you go out there, you'll die. Do you have a plan? Are you okay with dying? You have to survive first before you can do anything to help your daughter if she's out there. Because phone services are down and we can't do anything. You won't even, you might be able to track like where she was before. Because she's like, oh, I guess she has like a Find My Phone app. And she's or a tracker on her daughter's phone. Be like, yeah, she's out there. But I don't know if that got shut down the moment the phone services went down. Or whether that's still active or not because the phone services are down, you won't be able to call her to find out where she is, or even like be in a general area and hear her phone go off because the call won't connect. Which once that was introduced in the Manhwa, I thought that was really interesting too. The concept of the reason why there's that beeping sound when you're connected to a call, it's because it's supposed to be like There's no, I don't know the actual explanation for it, but I think it's such a neat storytelling device of right. It's a warning device to let you know monsters are nearby, and I thought that was so neatly implemented. It's because our first taste of that both in the show and in the webtoon is through Hyun's experience with half a head monster. Which, speaking of that whole sequence in Hyun's room where he peeks out and he sees the dad going down, which interesting difference between the manhwa and the live action. He's using rope. It's actually full on rope that he's using. In the manhwa, he basically uses bed sheets, like your classic like, oh, I'm escaping from prison, like I tied a whole bunch of bed sheets together type of thing. It's like either clothes or sheets basically he's using to climb down, and they eventually tear. I think in this case he just ended up accidentally letting go of the rope. It didn't snap or anything, but yeah, he falls to his death because the eyeball like was there and just scared the shit out of him, and he fell and died. So Hyun tried to get the creature's attention by throwing his monitor at it because he's scared, and he still tries to confront it, but the thing almost strangles him to death if it wasn't for Dusik, who ends up being the one that saves him. The very like MacGyver like contraption he's got, because they kind of reference him as being kind of a MacGyver in the webtoon. Because he makes, I don't know what that reference was. I don't know if that's actually supposed to be a translated reference to something that I'm not getting when he's like, oh yeah, like I was kind of a legend in this particular Korean town, and being like, yeah, like how you make a tank from a blueprint. And he was kind of just, I guess, showing his hands like, hey, I can like slap some stuff together and even build a tank. I was that guy. But yeah, the kids are left alone. Their dad's dead. Despite what Dusik had done, shooting the creature and severing the eyeball from the rest of the body, as we see, these things aren't that easy to kill. It just disconnected from the severed tentacle and just went off headless. So either it's just going to forever be headless, because as we see, like, they can just get rid of body parts that don't matter anymore, but it doesn't seem like, so far, it doesn't seem like they regrow anything, because the thing with half a head, either it hasn't regrown it yet and eventually will, or it's forever stuck that way, meaning that creature's forever going to wander around headless, which might not be too bad considering like these things are, I don't think they really dive. Well, no, Dusik brings it up of like these things you got to be careful. Like they lean into it, like they explain it a little bit more, tiny bit more in the manhwa of like these things have increased hearing. It's not just the half a head thing, like it can't see and stuff like that. Sure, but it has good hearing, but they're all sensitive to hearing. They're basically like zombies. I don't know if it's going to be a thing of, because that thing has the ear, it specifically is a lot more sensitive to sound, especially because it no longer has eyesight, or whether they just all have the exact same heightened level of hearing. I'd assume it's all across the board heightened, but I don't know if that one in particular has even more hearing abilities than the others. Which this episode also leaned into the thing I brought up last episode of, because we hadn't really gotten any monster dialogue in this episode. We did. It's like, I can't see. That's really all it is. Or like, oh, I know you're here. Like, simple phrases is all you get with these creatures, at least what I'm aware of. It's like 2 or 3 words at a time at most. But Hyun makes his way to Dusik to try and like, hey, how do we help the kids? It's like, well, you're going to have to go, but make sure you don't get caught. Because if you run into those things, run for your life. Don't try and fight it because you won't be able to kill them. I'm giving you something that you can defend yourself with, but it will not kill these creatures. So you're better off running for your life. Better yet, don't even get caught in the first place. Because we do see that Dusik has like military history. But also like his MacGyver weapon that he created, his pseudo gun, is a 3 shots and it's done type of thing. So it's like, right, I'm saving that last shot for myself. It was good for Hyun to have his like real first victory after he gets his whole contraption. They also make that situation a little more positive because if I remember correctly, Dusik's like final words, because Hyun doesn't hear it, but it's kind of like, yeah, there's a good chance you're not going to survive this or something like that. Your chances of survival are very low. He kind of waited to say that until like after like Hyun had already left the room. They kind of didn't put that spin to it. It's like, hey, just do what you can to survive. Like, not trying to leave that off on a negative spin. Once again, so it's interesting to see what dialogue and situations they keep and where they decide to cut certain scenes of like, let's not include that. I guess we don't want it to be as pessimistic. We want there to be a little more hopefulness, make things a little more optimistic. Which, speaking of, really quickly, I forgot to talk about this when it came to the firefighter and Hyuk, when they were talking about, looking at the security cameras, it's like they can only do so much because there's so few of them. But there was a conversation about the gates being locked and stuff again. And Hyuk's perspective was more like, oh, maybe they weren't meant to lock us in. Maybe they were meant to lock out those creatures and protect us. Which I was like, wow, you have a much more positive outlook on this. Because I was super pessimistic being like, were you locked inside? Because I still don't know. I don't have the answer for who did that. So I'd assume the security guard did it, but I don't know. Because they can't access footage. Because you can look at the security cameras live, but any recorded footage you can't watch because you need a password. The only person most likely had that is the security guard, and we have no idea where he is. I don't know if he's that thing out there. I don't think that was him. I don't think he's... I could be mistaken, but I don't think that was him with the half-severed head creature. I don't think that was him. Not unless he's that thing that the two of them are looking at in the security footage that seems like it's in a parking lot. Where all the cars are. The underground parking lot. Like, I don't know if that's supposed to be him transformed into that big thing or not. Either way, circling back to Hyun's situation, his encounter with that monster, and I love how that sequence plays out. I knew what was going to happen, but even when it popped up to the elevator to surprise Hyun, it still got me. I'm like, I knew the thing was going to come back because I knew, because it plays out beat for beat. But I'm like, it still made me jump a little bit when it like popped into the elevator, like, oh, I hear you. So, and they don't even give you the illusion of, like, even though we heard what we heard, they still don't give you the illusion of like, this thing might be dead. It's not even fully incapacitated. At least in Webtoon made you think like it was fully incapacitated. He was like even saying like, I think Hyun goes like, like this time like stay asleep for a while. The thing is twitching and it's even got its hand behind his back, so it still might be out of commission for a bit. But that thing is like, right, like the fact that it's still moving at all means it's cognitive and conscious enough. But luckily, Hyun ended up running into the kids, and he's promising to look after them. I'm curious when he looks at them, he's probably thinking a little bit about him and his sister, maybe. But just like him trying to promise the kids, like, hey, you're going to be okay. There's a guy like on the room 4 on the 14th floor. We get to him, we're good, we're golden. So all we have to do is just get there, and we'll be able to get you some food. And he's telling like the 6-year-old, the boy, like, hey, we're going to be okay. I'm going to protect you. And you can just see his hands shaking because he's scared shitless himself, understandably. But he's trying to put on a brave face for them. It's like, if I'm not scared, maybe they won't be scared. But then his nose starts gushing. This is where we start getting into more of the monsterization. And there being this like element of, like there's a demonic side that's talking to Hyun, and we get a little bit more of his backstory, which even I don't have the full context for that. Some of what we got is covered in what I've read, but other bits of it, it's still like unclear like what that's all about. Like there's stuff included in that montage that even I haven't seen from the webtoon, but some of it is. So we kind of find out more about why he hurt himself. Like I said, but we have no like full context, and even I don't have the full context of everything. I have an idea, but I don't know some of the leading events that kind of led to that fallout. But it seems like from what we see, like there's someone that he might have been friends with that he might have. We do see them like holding a bat and saying like, "I'm sorry," because they were bullied into hurting him. They all kind of were like, "Hey, let's beat him up together." And there's one particular main guy that went after Hyun. I don't know the reason why he did that, but the guys with glasses is forced to hit him with the bat. And he's like, "Oh, this is your fault. It's your fault." And we even see later on, Hyun pushes him out into traffic, and I guess he gets hit by a car. Once again, this is just purely based on the montage we saw, and all of that's so out of context. But we do see Hyun in a bathroom, like school bathroom, getting beat up, and it seemed like he was fighting back. So I don't know if that's like he was like confronting the bully, being like, "It's your fault. I did what I did," and just this all ties into why he tried to hurt himself. Not tried, he did successfully hurt himself. Like he has a massive scar on his hand, and now it's just they had this voice telling him he's a coward. Hey, you're trying to act brave in front of the weak. And this is, like I said, this is part of the monsterization, like giving into your desires. And I guess we see him kind of doing that at the end. We'll have more context going into the next episode, but like I said, I know that tiny bit about the desire monsterization stuff, but it's still like fully unclear how that fully works out and plays, because the desired situation it's a different circumstance, because in the manhwa that it's not a one for one, but that similar sequence of like, oh, like listen to this voice that's kind of like a darker version of you talking to you. That happened while he was still dealing with the eyeball thing in his room. So it happened in that sequence. Not once again, because I haven't gotten to this far, so I don't know if it's kind of the sequence got even worse. That situation got even worse after he rescues the kids. Like I haven't even gotten to him rescuing. He hasn't gotten to the kid's room. He had just knocked out the half-headed creature where I left off in the manhwa, I believe. So I'm very, very interested to see where all of this ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. Like I said, I'm going to shut my mouth about comparing and contrasting. I know you're probably sick of it because I've done it 2 episodes back to back, but at least going forward, it's going to be pure speculation on my part because I have no idea where this is going to go because I'm not this far in the story yet. So there's that silver lining, I guess. But I'm excited to see where the next episode takes us going forward with all of this. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good